A lot of my work deals with the sorts of feelings that we tend to avoid talking about. Um, Feelings of isolation, of depression, um, feelings of one's own person as strange, or even aspects of one's person as unwelcome. One of the things, this is related to a lot of time and a lot of experience wrestling with my own difficulties regarding my own emotional landscape. Despite my comparatively calm public demeanor, and that is very practiced. That is very practiced. Not despite of, but because of, rather. I have a very calm public demeanor because my passions tend to be very intense. My emotions tend to be very intense. And when I was younger, many people found that difficult to be around. And yeah, even persons that I cared for very deeply, and I did not and do not want the intensity with which I feel to be a burden or an imposition on other people. And so I learned how to, I learned how to kind of tone it down. But this means that when I feel things like anger or grief or sorrow, they tend to be very intense, all-consuming. And similarly, when I feel things like joy, happiness, pride in other persons, or if I grab onto an idea that I find exciting, that also tends to be very, very intense. And one of the things that I have found curious about that, interesting about that, is that there was no real difference in terms of negative response from other people. Whether the intensely felt and intensely expressed emotion was what we would generally connote as positive or as negative. That the intensity of my excitement or joy could be as off-putting as the intensity of a depression. One aspect of that is that there seemed to be a presumption. Well, I discovered that in the mode of public speaking, that people had no difficulty accepting these kinds of ranges of expression. That as long as I was standing behind a podium or in front of a microphone, that intensity was accepted and viewed as laudable. But the moment that I stepped outside of that context, people expected a diminishment, as if the fire that they saw in the performance was affected, was something that I put on, and because it was something that I could put on, it was something that I could and perhaps should take off. There seemed to be, and seems to be, a presumption that the people that we see as loud, raucous, fiery, or passionate in the context of a public persona or of a performance, there seems to be an assumption that kind of expression or that kind of feeling would necessarily be false, that it is necessarily a fiction, rather than considering the possibility of it being the other way around. That the comparatively demure person that we see backstage or at the after party, that maybe that's the fiction. Maybe that's when they're performing.